Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you back to my channel. Thank you very much for finding me. If you're new here, I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia, without any greenhouses or humidifiers or grow lights, just me, either indoors or outdoors, or they're out of the pool. So if that is of any interest to you, do hit subscribe. I post every week. And now, yes, plant lovers, no, I am not growing wheatgrass. Was it in the noughties, that thing about wheatgrass and cutting it off and putting it in smoothies? Anyway, I do not have pots of wheatgrass. I have been to a plant sale. Again! Yes, I know, plant lovers. Let me tell you all, and obviously the plants, I've got 4 unusual plants, but also just some other information about why it's great to go to such things. So we're going to talk about the plants particularly, and then why those kind of sale environments can be really useful, particularly for those like me who are complete amateurs. Okay, let me set the scene. So one of my very kind subscribers left me a message saying, Matthew, did you know that there is an orchid and bonsai exhibition this weekend? I of course went, oh, no! So I frantically Googled, and there it is. It's a Facebook group, which we'll get to in a minute. So I saw the details and realized it was last weekend and thought, oh well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. A bit of a schlep for me, let me just say, about a 40-minute drive. But anyway, you know what? Nothing will come between me and an orchid buying opportunity. But it was a bonsai and orchid show. So I did feel there'd be lots of bonsais and not that many orchids, which proved to be the case. But what there was were amazing. So it's a local organization, and basically it was a demonstration really of bonsai, the bonsai art, potting. All the bonsais were for sale, but also there was a small amount of orchids and an orchid display. Fantastic orchid plants. So I'm here to tell you, I'm not a lover of bonsai. Apologies to all of you who may be. And I think for me, it's just because of that the nature of constriction and pruning and clipping and restriction and reducing. I don't like seeing things overly pruned as well. I like trees that have the space to grow and shrubs to do what they want. Anyway, I can appreciate the artistry and the care and the knowledge that goes into creating great bonsai. And it can look beautiful when it's well displayed. But anyway, not my bag. So I quickly walked through the bonsai, and there was a small table of orchid plants. Now, apologies, I didn't take any footage. Again, I didn't feel it was wildly appropriate, although this time, unlike the previous plant sale I went to, there was no one there. So I was looking at the orchids that were in bloom on display, beautiful, and then there was the table of plants for sale. Not many, and quite a few number of a limited array of species. And I started to pick up, you know, orchids as you do, and was Googling the name to see if it would work for me. And the grower came up to me and said, hi, you know, can I help you? And that, plant lovers, is where the conversation just exploded, because she is a cold grower, which means in Australia that you basically have a shade house. So you're protecting the orchids from the harsh sun and you're protecting them from rain, but not cool winter nighttime minimums. So this is exactly my setup, hence my joy in talking to her. So a lot of these plants I have actually seen before online or read about and thought, oh, I could never grow them because they're warm to hot, or they're from the Philippines, and there aren't many orchid species in the Philippines that I can grow. Obviously, I'm not in the tropics. So it was just so amazing to talk to the growers. So plant lovers, the first takeaway gem from this is, firstly, thank you to my subscriber who gave me the lead, because it was wonderful. Secondly, the reason why you should try and find these groups or sales is to meet growers in your area who have experience with plants and can broaden your horizons. So I'm very grateful to Han, the grower. Thank you very much. And she spent a lot of time with me going through each of them, and it was just really great. Anyway, so I will now, shall I, show you each one? I might move the tray of grass. Some of them do look grassy. And let's start with this one, which is a Dendrobium. Now, what you might be able to see is that it is Dendrobium moniliforme. I love a bit of Italian in my orchid names. Now, this is an orchid that I actually already have a form of. And plant lovers, here it is. It is the variegated form. Can you see those leaves? Now, variegation, I know, is deeply popular and fashionable at the moment, not just for sort of tropical indoor plants, but really everything. Variegation is having its moment in the sun. Pardon the pun, because often variegated things don't need the sun that much, but anyway. And I didn't buy this because it was variegated. I bought it because at the time it was the only plant of moniliforme that I could find. And this one that I bought at the weekend is obviously the plain leafed form, but this one has pink blooms and the general color of the blooms is white. So I have a white bloomer with variegated leaves and a pink bloomer with plain leaves. So I don't know, I feel they're going to be very happy together. So some information, this orchid type has a really wide distribution from Japan, Korea, all the way across into the Himalayas, so northern Indochina, quite a broad range of habitat and a broad range of heat tolerance. It grows in a range of altitudes and it can take really warm summer temperatures, but it can also take really, let's say, cold winter temperatures, which makes it very versatile and perfect for my climate. And although I haven't had my variegated form flower yet, I feel it's going to be relatively easy for me to flower in Melbourne. Now, I obviously can't give you wildly experienced cares, but I probably will in a year's time when I've had it for a year. But this one I have actually had for nearly a year. When I bought it, it was literally just a couple of sticks, a couple of canes, and it's produced, I think, 3 new really healthy growths. It's not one of those massive growing dendrobiums. It's always quite small. So I doubt if the canes will ever get much taller than that. And then it has clusters of flowers, as most of those nobile type of dendrobiums do, opposite the leaf nodes. And I have read that it tends to be on the leafless cane. So as the cane ages, matures, drops its leaves, and then the node on the opposite side from the leaf will produce a little bud, and Bob's your uncle. However, plant lovers, I have discovered with my Dendrobium Victoria Reginae, which I made a video about, that in fact that is also supposed to flower from canes that have dropped their leaves, and in fact mine didn't. It has bloomed from canes that are still in leaf. So let's wait and see if that is the case with moniliforme. And another quick botanic sociology lesson. Dendrobium, I guess I did know this, but perhaps had forgotten, literally is a Latin translation, named in 1799, and it comes from the ancient Greek dendron, meaning tree, and bios, meaning life. Tree of life! Now, I don't think it actually refers to the growing habit. I think what that refers to is the fact that at that point in 1799, dendrobiums were all assumed to be epiphytic, growing on trees. Hence, the life of the plant is given by the tree, dendron, bios, dendrobium. And just because I was curious as well, moniliforme actually means necklace-like. So the prefix monil or monile, I don't know, in Latin means necklace and form means like. So tree of life, necklace-like. Isn't that bizarre? Now I wonder what the necklace-like bit refers to. Is it the nature of the cane, which is kind of bulbous and a point, and then bulbous and then a point? So it kind of does look like beads strung on the necklace, maybe? I don't know. I think that's a pretty long bow. But anyway, I am thrilled to have found this one. So this is a pink flowering, plain leaf form to my white flowering, variegated form. My care for this one is similar to most Dendrobium nobile types in that it has a dry rest in winter. And this particular species, moniliforme, does need that cold temperature differentiation in winter to stimulate the flowering, which occurs in late winter, early spring, like many of the nobile type orchids. So, given its heat range, you could certainly grow this in a very much warmer climate than mine, but it does need cool/cold winters or a couple of months of cooler weather in winter to stimulate the flowers. So, quite a versatile orchid as long as you can give it its winter chill. Okay, plant lovers, on to the next, and when these flower, I will do a specific care video about them because I feel they're going to be very beautiful. The other thing about both of those is that they have been long cultivated in both Japan and China. And if you Google it and look at how Japanese growers grow them, they grow them sort of in a ball of moss and often in very vase-like cylindrical terracotta pots, which look stunning. There's a thought. Now this one, as you can see, it's actually, I would think perhaps slightly over potted, but I'm not going to repot it just yet. I'm going to let it do its thing, see if it blooms for me, and then maybe in the spring I might even pot it down, or I might just leave it as it is. So although I, as you might know, quite vehemently opposed to the use of plastic, sometimes you got to give a little. Okay, on to the next. which is this little beauty here. Now, at first glance, I thought it was a Masdevallia, and I have, let's just say, enough Masdevallia to sink the Titanic. So I thought, yeah, nah, as we say in Australia. But it is not a Masdevallia. It is Stelis porschiana, which is in fact not its Q recognized name, which is Stelis papaquerensis, which sounds like an interesting name, doesn't it? You and me both, I think, perhaps a little tired of keeping up with all the taxonomy name changes. Anyway, this is a plant that is native to quite a broad stretch of North and East South America. So it has a pretty wide range, and that range also includes its elevation. So it can get quite high, which means it's generally good for my climate. So generally things that are a high elevation orchid can do well for me. Although, of course, high elevation means weaker sun and more cloud cover. So it's not that logically simple that I could grow something if it is high altitude. But anyway, it's a fairly good rule of thumb that's not a rule. Anyway, this plant, look at it, isn't it gorgeous? And you can see the leaves look very Masdevallia-like. And it has, and in fact it's got, as you can see, these spikes here, and it has the tiniest little flowers. It's supposed to be a spring bloomer, but I've actually got new flower spikes coming out sort of all over it. And this larger spike, which is about to open. So there you go, perhaps it's just happy in Australia. So the thing about this is that it's a very prolific flower, so you really have this ball of quite small flowers, which are sort of a little furry around the edge, but just a really beautiful mass of flowering. So not the most flashy of flowers, and I'm not sure if it's fragrant or not, but a very beautiful thing. And again, this is one that Han the grower grows outside cool, and she's actually in a part of Melbourne which is closer to some of the hills to the east of the city, which actually gets relatively cold. I was going to say really cold, but obviously not if you're Canadian, but relatively cold for Melbourne. So her winter minimums can get down to -2 degrees centigrade, which is the high 20s Fahrenheit. So, you know, below freezing, a bit chilly, and she grows this really well. Anyway, I am really thrilled to have this, and when it blooms, we shall just see if it is worthy. Such a healthy plant though, look at that. And again, in plastic, but I think doing extremely well. I am not going to repot this immediately. Again, I might do it in spring, although it's supposed to be a spring bloomer. So in fact, I might wait until after it's bloomed. We're now in autumn and it's got these flower spikes. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Anyway, we'll watch this space. Okay, on to the next. And the next is this one. And this does look like grass, doesn't it? It is, I don't know if you can read that, Gomesa radicans. Isn't it an interesting looking plant? And I'm not sure if you can see, let me find them. There we go. There, plant lovers, is a flower spike. So this one can flower in the autumn, but it's also a spring bloomer, but it can bloom twice a year. So I'm very happy it is. As you can see, it looks very grass-like. Again, an epiphytic orchid that is native to, I guess we're going to call it the southeast of Brazil, the coastline around Rio and Sao Paulo, around there, and described again as a warm to hot grower, which is something that I would not have thought that I could grow outdoors all year. And the great thing about all of these 4 plants for me is that they can all just stay outside all year, which is great because it means I don't have to find space inside, and it's always easier for me to find space outside. So although perhaps I wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards some of these, they're not going to take up much space because actually all of these are quite small types of plants, and they're going to bloom for me without me having to move them. So I was just thrilled. Again, so native habitat, much warmer in winter than mine, but Han, the grower who grows hers in Melbourne, grows hers outside undercover all year, and it thrives. That is one of the benefits of finding growers in your area, because they can often demonstrate to you that some of those conditions, those precepts that we think an orchid can only thrive under, can be slightly stretched in your environment. So it's always good to try and meet as many people as you can. Anyway, this one has beautiful spikes covered in very small flowers again. The flowers do look like little tiny oncidium-like flowers, but a lot of them on a spike. And so again, you have this beautiful dome of multiple flower spikes. And I think this one has got a couple of spikes, so for such a small plant, I'm thrilled with that. So yeah, I'm curious to see what it's going to do. And although the leaves look very grassy, it actually does have quite defined pseudobulbs at the base, and the flower spike is coming out of that leaf sheath at the bottom of the pseudobulb as an oncidium flower spike would, or a Miltoniopsis would. So it flowers in that same sort of way, and I would presume it's flowering off the mature pseudobulb from last year's growth, but don't hold me to that. As it can bloom twice a year, I would imagine that it's quite a vigorous grower, so it could have 2 cycles of bulb maturing in a season, hence you can get 2 flower cycles from it. But the interesting thing too, plant lovers, because you know I love a little bit of botanic history, Gomesa and radicans. So the suffix radicans in botany, so any plant that will have the word radicans after it, is derived from the Latin, which means stems that take root. What that name suggests is that it's a bit of a creeper, as you can see, and as you can see, it is also producing little aerial roots. So in fact, it's going to creep along the surface and colonize an area like that. Hence the name radicans. I didn't know that. I just found out, and I love it. And Dr. Bernardo Antonio Gomes was a Portuguese botanist in the 18th century, and this was named after him by a Scotsman called Robert Brown, who in fact also came to Australia and named a lot of Australian plants in the late 18th, early 19th century. So there you go. Gomesa radicans, a beautiful little plant. Again, not something I thought I could grow in my climate, but I can. Very prolific grower, very prolific flower. Can't wait when it blooms. I'll show you. All right, last cab off our plant sale rank is this. Now, oops, I have seen this for sale from a orchid species specialist seller here in Australia, and it is Dendrochilum wenzelii. And if you Google this one, it has arching spikes of red flowers, which is beautiful. But it is, again, a Philippine species, which grows warm to hot, something that I wouldn't be able to do unless I grew it indoors all the time. And you know, space is an issue, and it's not that fabulous to take up all this space indoors, so it's not something I ever looked at. But there it was at this plant sale, and Han, the grower, said, I grow it outside. It's undercover, but it gets sometimes sub-zero centigrade temperatures, so that high 20s Fahrenheit. Below freezing, it's undercover, protected from frost, so it's not wet in those temperatures, but it thrives, and I would never in a million years have thought it would. It's actually quite tough leathery leaves, so that would suggest it's a tough beast. It can get to reasonably high elevations in its native environment, which I guess is how it can adapt to take quite cooler temperatures in winter at night for me. And this is a late winter, early spring bloomer, so we'll see what happens then. Only once a year, I think. And the name, you know I love a name, plant lovers. So Dendrochilum wenzelii. So it turns out this was named in 1915 after the plant collector Chester A. Wenzel, who was in the Philippines and was writing to various botanic institutions, including Kew, suggesting that he would basically collect things and sell them to them. So Mr. Wenzel is forever immortalized, wenzelii, in this plant, as he collected it from a mountain in the Philippines. So again, I can't give you any care instructions, plant lovers, except to say that it is a warm to hot grower, and I do not live in a warm to hot climate. But as I know from the grower who I bought it from, it can take our winter minimum. So again, an epiphyte growing in trees, so the usual kind of light, which is dappled bright indirect light. It is not something that has pseudo bulbs, so I'm imagining it's probably not going to want to dry out. But again, in winter, I am not going to overwater it. So yeah, we'll see what happens with this. But anyway, very excited to know that I can grow this in my climate outdoors all year with no trouble. So there we are, plant lovers. There is my tray of 4 new exciting orchids that are all relatively small bloomers, plants that perhaps some of them I would never have thought I could grow outdoors all year here in my climate, but I can, and all of them quite unusual. So I'm so excited. So there you go. Once again, thank you very much to my subscriber that said, Matthew, you should go and check this out. Thank you very much to Han, the grower, who spent so much time with me going through each one, telling me exactly what she does and doesn't do and how they all thrive. She also had the most enormous Miltonia guanabara, which I have and I made a video about, and it was in a huge shallow pot, but covered in blooms, and she grows that outside all year. So she gets, as I said, sub-zero centigrade temperatures, high 20s in Fahrenheit, and it's a Miltonia, and her plant looked incredibly healthy and covered in bloom. So that is a real rethinking of all my Miltonia care, but I'm still not sure I'm going to thrust mine outside all winter just yet, but I did get great potting ideas from her. Anyway, what can I say? If you can find such things, it's a great place to meet people, learn more, and obviously buy plants that you might not see everywhere. And as I said, I found this ultimately through my subscriber, this organization, which only has a Facebook presence. So one of the other things to have a look at is just look at all those groups on Facebook near you, or in your city or your region, your area, and join them. You will find that they quite often have sales. So I have joined that one, and hopefully it will continue to bring me joyous shopping opportunities. Anyway, plant lovers, from my tray of 4 plants to you, thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed vicariously my delight, and I'm sorry I couldn't take footage at the sale itself, but you can imagine what it was like, I'm sure. I do post every week, so hit subscribe, and I hope you are well where'er you are in these troubled times in which we live, and I look forward to seeing you next week.